SingleDad. Texted his friend, "My boss is so hot," and accidentally sent it to his boss instead. Rohan Malhotra's life had been reduced to careful balance between morning lunches packed in haste, late-night homework sessions, and a job that demanded more from him than it ever promised to give back. Being a single father at 34 was not a story he had planned, but it was the one he lived every day with quiet resilience. His mornings began before sunrise, when the city still slept and his small apartment echoed with the soft hum of responsibility. His 6-year-old daughter, Anaya, was the center of his world. The reason he endured the long commute, the reason he accepted overtime without complaint, and the reason he tried often unsuccessfully to keep his emotions in check. The office where he worked was a sleek glass building, modern and efficient. But to Rohan, it felt like a place where emotions were carefully hidden behind polished emails and neutral expressions. And presiding over it all was his boss, Maya Kapoor. She was intelligent, composed, and undeniably striking. Rohan had noticed it the first day she walked into the conference room in her confident stride, her presence commanding silence without demanding it. Over time, admiration had crept in where professionalism should have stayed firm. He never acted on it, never allowed it to show. But thoughts had a way of slipping through cracks, especially when life already felt overwhelming. That afternoon, exhaustion sat heavy on his shoulders. Anaya had been sick the night before, leaving him with barely any sleep, and the pressure of an upcoming presentation tightened his chest. During a short break, he leaned back in his chair and unlocked his phone, scrolling through messages from his best friend, Samir, the one person who knew the full chaos of his life. Samir had been his anchor since college, the only one Rohan felt safe venting to without judgment. Without overthinking, driven by fatigue and a moment of unguarded honesty, Rohan typed a message meant for release, not consequence. "My boss is so hot." It was a stupid sentence, he realized even as he typed it, but it carried no intention beyond a fleeting confession, a harmless outlet. His thumb moved on instinct, muscle memory taking over, and he hit send. The relief lasted exactly 2 seconds. The name at the top of the chat window was not Samir's. It was Maya Kapoor, his boss. The world seemed to tilt as the realization slammed into him. His heart dropped into his stomach, his fingers went cold, and the noise of the office faded into a distant blur. He stared at the screen as if it might correct itself, as if reality would bend out of pity. It didn't. Panic rushed in, fast and merciless. Thoughts collided in his head, apologies, excuses, explanations sounding hollow before they were even formed. He considered deleting the message, but the read receipt appeared almost instantly, saying that single word felt heavier than any reprimand he had ever received. Rohan straightened in his chair, his breathing shallow eyes darting instinctively toward Maya's glass-walled office across the floor. The blinds were half open. He couldn't see her clearly, but he knew she was there. Every second stretched thick with dread. He imagined her expression changing as she read the message: confusion, annoyance, disappointment, or worse, amusement. The thought that she might laugh at him, reduce his already fragile dignity to a joke, made his throat tighten. He had worked so hard to be seen as reliable, professional, worthy of trust. One careless moment threatened to undo all of it. Minutes passed, each one louder than the last. His phone buzzed. Rohan flinched, nearly dropping it. A reply notification. He didn't open it right away. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios. A formal warning. A call from HR. A quiet but devastating shift in how she treated him. He thought of Anaya's school fees, rent, the fragile stability he had built brick by brick. A single mistake shouldn't be able to shake all that. But he knew life wasn't fair like that. Finally, with a deep breath that felt more like surrender than courage, he opened the message. It was brief, calm, unexpectedly neutral. "Let's talk after work," it read. No emojis, no exclamation points. Just a sentence that carried 1,000 possible meanings. His stomach twisted. That was worse than anger. That was uncertainty. The rest of the day crawled. Every email he sent felt mechanical, every conversation forced. He avoided eye contact, afraid that if he looked up, he'd find Maya already watching him, already judging. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, the office slowly emptied, the usual chatter fading into silence. Rohan remained seated, frozen by anticipation. Eventually, there was no avoiding it. He stood, smoothed his shirt with trembling hands, and walked toward her office. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though he were walking into a verdict he hadn't earned but couldn't escape. He knocked softly. "Come in," her voice replied, steady and unreadable. As he entered, he noticed details he hadn't before: the neat stack of files, the framed certificate on the wall, the calm order that mirrored her demeanor. She gestured for him to sit. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, charged with unspoken words. Rohan opened his mouth to apologize, to explain, to beg if necessary, but before he could speak, she looked at him with an expression that surprised him entirely. It wasn't anger. It wasn't mockery. It was something far more complex. Something that made his carefully constructed assumptions begin to crack. And in that moment, Rohan realized that the message he wished he could take back had already changed everything. Whether he was ready for it or not, Maya leaned back in her chair, her fingers loosely folded, studying Rohan not as a superior evaluating a mistake, but as a person weighing a truth that had unexpectedly landed in her lap. The silence stretched, but it no longer felt threatening, felt deliberate. Rohan finally found his voice, the words tumbling out in a rush of sincerity. He apologized, not with rehearsed excuses, but with raw honesty, explaining the exhaustion, the misplaced message, and the deep embarrassment that followed. He spoke of Anaya without being asked, of the weight he carried each day, trying to be enough at work and at home. His confession wasn't strategic. It was vulnerable. When he finished, he sat back, shoulders slumped, as if bracing for impact. Maya listened without interrupting, her expression calm yet thoughtful, absorbing not just his words, but the man behind them. When she finally spoke, her tone was composed, almost gentle. She told him she appreciated his honesty, that mistakes, while uncomfortable, were often windows into people's lives rather than reflections of their professionalism. She made it clear that his message, though inappropriate, would not define his career or diminish the respect she had for his work. Relief washed over him so suddenly that it nearly made him dizzy. But Maya wasn't finished. She acknowledged something he hadn't. Expected her to say that being admired wasn't an insult, but boundaries mattered. She explained how leadership often meant navigating uncomfortable moments with clarity rather than punishment. For the first time since the message was sent, Rohan felt seen not as an employee who had crossed a line, but as a human being who had stumbled. Maya shifted the conversation, asking about his workload, his recent performance, and whether the pressure he was under was sustainable. The question caught him off guard. No manager had ever asked him that before. He admitted he was struggling, not because he lacked dedication, but because he was afraid to ask for flexibility. The unspoken fear of being judged as less capable had kept him silent. Maya nodded, understanding more than he expected. She shared briefly and without drama that she too had built her career while carrying responsibilities few people noticed, and that strength didn't always look like Endurance it sometimes looked like knowing when to adjust. What followed was not a dramatic turning point, but a subtle, meaningful shift. Maya offered practical changes, flexible hours on certain days, the option to work remotely when Anaya needed him, and support on the upcoming project that had been weighing on him. These weren't favors. They were solutions grounded in trust. Rohan felt something loosen inside him. A knot he hadn't realized had been tightening for years. He thanked her, not just for her understanding, but for her fairness. As he stood to leave, Maya stopped him, her expression firm but kind. She reminded him that respect went both ways. That professionalism wasn't about pretending feelings didn't exist, but about how one chose to act on them. Rohan nodded, fully aware that the lesson would stay with him far longer than the embarrassment that sparked it. The days that followed felt different. Not lighter necessarily, but more honest. Rohan returned to his routine with a renewed sense of purpose. He worked hard, but without the constant fear of collapse. At home, Anaya noticed the change before he did. He smiled more. He listened better. He was present in ways exhaustion had once stolen from him. The office, too subtly transformed. Maya's leadership remained firm, but her openness created a ripple effect. Conversations became more transparent, and the invisible walls between roles softened just enough to let empathy through. Rohan maintained a respectful distance, his admiration tempered by gratitude and understanding. Whatever unspoken tension had once existed dissolved into mutual respect. Months later, as Rohan prepared for a presentation that would mark a major step forward in his career, he caught Maya's eye across the room. There was no awkwardness, no lingering shadow of that message, only quiet acknowledgement of a moment that could have ended badly but didn't. He delivered his presentation with confidence, drawing from the stability he had fought so hard to protect. When the meeting ended, the applause felt earned, not just for the work he presented, but for the growth behind it. That single mistaken text, once a source of panic, had become an unlikely catalyst. It taught him that integrity wasn't about perfection, and leadership wasn't about power. It was about perspective. That evening, as he tucked Anaya into bed, she asked him why he seemed happier lately. Rohan smiled, brushing her hair back gently, and told her that sometimes life surprises you in ways that feel terrifying at first, but turn out to be lessons you didn't know you needed. He didn't mention the text or the fear, or the long silence in a glass-walled office. He didn't need to. What mattered was what came after: the courage to face consequences, the grace to accept understanding, and the quiet realization that growth often begins in the moments we wish we could undo.